Welcome. We are here today to mourn the passing of a man who needs almost no introduction. A man who so defines and is defined by our community, and in fact the entire state of Colorado, that we come here today across so many different groups of people. It is a beautiful blessing and a beautiful tribute to who Eddie was that we are all sitting here today. I'm Rabbi Elizabeth Sachs.
Rabbi Emily Hyatt.
And as we begin this process of mourning Eddie Robinson, we begin with Psalm 121. Because when we think about how dear and precious Colorado was to Eddie, his one and only home, his place where his heart really lived, how could we not look to words from our tradition that say, I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help will come from those mountains, from where the idea and the Spirit of God surely resides. Psalm 121. Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai ose shamayim va'aretz al yiten lamot raglecha al yanum shomrecha hine lo yanum velo yishon shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha al יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. By day, the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever.
When someone like Eddie leaves us, we have this sort of unimaginable task of thinking about how we turn the presence of a man who was so much to so many into a legacy. And it's a hard job. So I want to share with you a reading, a passage about the people of, unexpectedly, Rome, who spoke of the great artist Michelangelo. And they said that Michelangelo was a man who had 4 souls because he excelled in architecture and sculpture and in painting and poetry. And it was his skill and his vision that had produced so many of the beautiful buildings and statues that filled Rome. And at the end of his life, Michelangelo was on his deathbed, and he was surrounded by his friends and his students, and they were devastated to imagine a world that he wasn't in. And one friend cried out to him, "Michelangelo, how will Rome ever get along without you?" And Michelangelo, in the last moments of his life, weakly waved his hand toward an open window next to his bed and the city that you could see through that open window, a city that was filled with his legacy and his creations and his art. And he said, "Rome will never be without me." The same is true for this place, for this city, for Colorado, and for Eddie, and so many of the institutions and organizations and people that he invested in. There were so many names on the list of organizations that Eddie had supported and sat on boards for and had contributed to and had supported philanthropically, that to imagine that just because Eddie is not here physically, it is so easy to see that he is still here in his impact, in his legacy, so much so that even just a moment ago, as Rabbi Sachs and I were preparing for this, we found this cow that is from the time that we had the opportunity here to honor Dick and Eddie together that says, "Got Temple, Dick and Eddie Robinson." There are pieces of your legacy, there are pieces of Eddie's legacy that live everywhere in this building and in this community, and whether or not they come in the form of dairy paraphernalia or not, we know that we will find them in the places that we least expected.
So we are sitting here today, and I think we knew that at one moment or another this day would come. But I think for so many of us, today still feels very sudden and very shocking. Because today, especially for all of you, family who are sitting here, today was so much sooner than we imagined it would be. And there are many of us, I imagine, who are sitting in this space who were with him just last week, having dinner, having deep conversations, soliciting trusted advice. And so when we turn to words of comfort for that moment that feels so hard, and when we acknowledge how bereft we are, we often use the words of Psalm 23. And in our tradition, the words of Psalm 23 talk about the soul of our loved one being in a peaceful place, a quiet place, a restful place. And we know that surely, and especially after the last 48 hours, that Eddie deeply deserves that. He deserves that his soul be at rest. He deserves to feel free and at peace. And so we turn to the words of Psalm 23. Adonai roi lo echsar bino deshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot al mei menuchot yenaleni nafshi yeshoveh yancheini v'maglei tzedek yancheini v'maglei tzedek lemon shemo gam ki elach begit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai kol yemei chayai v'shavti beved Adonai leyorech yamim Adonai roi lo echsar Adonai roi lo echsar. The words of Psalm 23. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. And even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you, Adonai, are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
There's a poem by the poetess Zelda, which is based on words of our tradition, which talk about how many different parts of us there are. And there are many parts of each of us. And this poem is called Each of Us Has a Name. Each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our stature and our smile and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death. And as we think about all of the different pieces of Eddie, all of the different names that he had and was called at different moments, we heard some really amazing stories about Uncle Eddie and how that was what anybody would call him when he walked into a bar in Chicago, because he was very well known. We learned a lot about Eddie the businessman. We learned a lot about Eddie the brother. We know how loving and devoted and dedicated Eddie was as a husband to his beloved Susan. We know that he was an incredible father and a pretty remarkable stepfather. We know that he was also a pretty amazing father-in-law. We know that he was a trusted friend, that he was an advisor, that he was a community member, and that there were so many for whom Eddie filled a really important role. And so in just a moment, we'll turn to the voices of his family and his friends and his loved ones as we hear the stories of Eddie. But before we do that, we take just a moment, each of us on our own, for a moment of silent prayer or reflection. What was Eddie for you? By what name did you know him? By what piece of his puzzle did you get to connect with him? We take a moment in silence.
May the words of my heart and the meditations of my mouth be acceptable to you,
And so, with that prayer in our hearts and our own reflections in our minds, we turn now to the words of others, looking to them to help us to begin to tell the story of a man who lived large in our minds and in our community. It is our great honor to call up several people in the following order. We're going to ask David Engelberg to begin, and then we'll call Deborah and Emily, and then Stephen, and then Rabbi Foster will close us out. David.
Eddie would be very proud of me today. I shaved this morning and I put a tie on. We used to talk about every time we went out if we should wear a tie or if we should not, if we should wear a sport coat. Anyway, the rabbis said it all. I mean, Eddie was such a friend, such a wonderful friend. It's hard to think about, the fact that he's gone, but he'll be remembered by all of us, I'm sure. They asked me to be very brief, and I will. There's a lot of stories I could tell about the times I was with Eddie and all our friends, but some of them are probably not appropriate for this time. You're going to hear a lot about Eddie today from a lot of people. But I want to tell you the truth, the emes, so to speak, about the Eddie I knew. I met Eddie when I moved to Denver in 1992. His wife, Susan, and I grew up together in Salt Lake City, so I've known Susan for a few years. Soon after arriving in Denver, I called Susan and we got together for dinner. Eddie and I hit it off immediately, and we started talking frequently, going to lunch and having dinner with our spouses. Soon I was asked to join the boards of the Allied Jewish Federation and National Jewish Health. Of course, Eddie was on both boards, so our paths crossed constantly. We sat next to each other at all the meetings. I occasionally had to tell Eddie what the speaker was saying because he never got his hearing aids to work properly. We were then invited to join two poker groups, one playing every other Monday evening and the other game once a month. I think he was the better player, but we both enjoyed the games. We did quite a bit together. We met for dinner every week for the last 20 years. And we talked on the phone almost every afternoon around 4 p.m. We talked about the boards we were on, the issues, the difficulties. We talked about current events, and there's a lot going on now, as you all know. We talked about our failures at the poker game, who should have bet, who should have raised, whatever. We talked about my kids in Israel and what was happening in Israel and if my kids were safe. And we talked a lot about what guys talk about. So we had a wonderful time. We talked about Eddie's doctor appointments. He would often go to the doctor 2 times a day. We would talk about the doctors he just saw, the doctors he was going to. Right after his passing, I said to one of the physicians that the income of many of Eddie's doctors is going to drop precipitously. And Dick Robinson was standing there, and he says, yes, but Medicare is going to be on budget, so that everything will be okay. Wherever we went, we would run into people who knew Eddie. In fact, we traveled to Europe together and we were in some small village in Italy. I mean, I don't even think it's on the map. We're standing there, and some guy comes running up screaming, "Eddie, Eddie." And it was a fellow from New Jersey who was on a dairy board with Eddie. And it's everywhere we went, New York, Los Angeles, wherever we went, somebody knew Eddie. It was amazing. It was a given, and it was inevitable that they were going to know him. Out to dinner, it was the same. No matter where we went, other friends and acquaintances would come over to say hello. He was always patient, accommodating, and interested, even when our dinners were interrupted. He took the time, he asked questions, he was grateful that they stopped by. Last Wednesday, Eddie and I went to dinner, a week ago today. Sure enough, 4 or 5 people came over to say hello throughout our meal, and I see Josh Hanfling was one of them. Eddie greeted each one of them cheerfully and talked for several minutes. As we were deciding whether to have dessert, and we always had ice cream for dessert, a couple a few tables away got up to leave and stopped at our table. The gentleman said to Eddie that he had been watching as people stopped to say hello, and that Eddie must know everyone in this town. And then he asked what Eddie did. Eddie looked at me, he smiled, he got that twinkle in his eye, and said proudly, "I am a milkman." Eddie was quite a guy, and just such a wonderful friend to have. You couldn't have a better friend. He was a friend to me, and I'm sure he was a friend to all of you. There are many things I learned from being around Eddie. You know, and the things that I learned from him made me so fond of him. Eddie was always cheerful. He was cheerful to everybody. I mean, I've seen him get angry, and he was angry for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he calmed down, and he was cheerful again. Eddie had a ready smile, always a ready smile. He was polite to everybody, all the time. He talked straight. If Eddie said something to you, you know it was true, and you could believe it. And he was always eager to help. He'd ask people, "Is there anything I can do for you? He asked me all the time, "Is there anything I can do for you? Do you need something?" He was just a wonderful friend. To sum it up, as best as I can, Eddie was a mensch, a real mensch, with the capital letters and an exclamation point to follow. And that's the truth about Eddie Robinson. I'll miss him terribly.
I'm the shortest in the family. Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah. I'm the oldest of the 3 of our girls, of my dad's girls. This is my son, Jacob. My stepson, Jonah, is sitting here, and my other Jacob is in Tampa, Florida, long ways away. My very first memory of my dad is one that has stayed with me all my life. I was just a little girl, and we had gone to the hardware store together. Unknowingly, I helped myself to a piece of bubble gum, thinking that was for anyone to take. I maybe was 5 years old. When we got home, my dad noticed. He told me I had taken something that was not mine and that we needed to make this right. He took my hand and he brought me back to the store to apologize and to pay for that small piece of gum. At that time, I didn't fully understand the lesson, But as I grew older, I realized that in that moment, my father was teaching me one of the most important values he carried throughout his life: integrity. To him, it didn't matter if it was a penny or a fortune. Right was right and wrong was wrong. That day, he taught me that honesty is not negotiable and that character is built in the little choices we make every day. As a teenager, when my parents divorced, my dad and I began our tradition that carried through to probably it would have been this weekend. We loved going to the movies. He loved Westerns and war movies, and he was so proud of the day I got to meet Clint Eastwood. I was starstruck. He just thought it was normal. He met so many people. But I was starstruck, and even in, oops, I lost my place. I was starstruck, and he was just so happy to share that moment with me. That tradition carried throughout our lives. Even in recent years, we'd pick a weekend and we would choose a movie. And I would say, "Dad, where are we going to go to dinner?" And he would always say the same thing: "Anywhere but not Shanahan's." So Mark, my apologies, but he'd probably already been there with David and somebody else that week. So I would pick a little neighborhood gem, and off we'd go. As David said, it didn't matter where we went, because everywhere we went, people knew my dad. Without fail, someone would stop at our table, shake his hand, or give him a hug. They'd say, "I used to work with you at the dairy." And in the later years, he couldn't remember the name, perhaps, but his face would light up. What mattered most was that people remembered him with warmth, and that meant the world to him. One of my latest memories with him captured that same spirit. We were leaving a restaurant, and Dad spotted a beautiful new Mercedes in the parking lot. We know how much my dad loved cars. Without hesitation, he walked right up to the owners and began asking them about all the little details inside this car. What started as a question turned into a lively back and forth conversation with complete strangers. As he walked away, he smiled and said, "I just love meeting new people." But above all else, my dad lived by the value of family first. He and my Uncle Dick shared a bond that lasted a lifetime. Through all of life's twists and turns, in business, in family, in good times and in hard ones, they stayed connected. They talked every single day. Families can be complicated, but their relationship showed me something simple and very profound. Love is love, and family comes first. You keep talking, you keep showing up, and you try hard never to leave in anger. My dad also taught us how to endure heartbreak with grace and purpose. When my sister Patty was diagnosed with cancer at the tender age of 38, he stood by her side every step of the way. She fought bravely for 10 years before passing away in 2008. There are no words for how a father must feel about losing a child, no matter the age, and yet out of that grief, my dad made a promise that upon his passing, he would make a generous gift in her memory. And in return for that pledge, a program would be created called the Patty Robinson Kaufman First Connection Program through the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Stephen helped design the program, which continues today, to bring people together, just as Patty and my dad always did, helping others in their time of need. And as proud as he was of Patty, there was a special bond, a special kind of protectiveness and tenderness I saw that he carried for his favorite youngest daughter, Emily. Being the baby of the family as we grew up, he always had a soft spot in his heart, and she in hers. Watching the special bond they shared reminded me of how deeply he cherished the role of being a dad. That deep care didn't stop with his daughters. It extended just as fully to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He was so proud of Jacob, Sam, and Zoe. He supported each in his own way and let them know that they were very loved. That was who my dad was, a man of integrity, a man of service, a man who valued connection and kindness, a man who put family first, Even in the hardest times, he lived his life with honesty and purpose, and he left us not only with memories, but with lessons to carry forward. The lessons he leaves us: integrity, honest, service, family, connection, to show up with an open heart, and resilience, are not just ideals, those will be his legacy. They are the compasses he gave me to navigate my life. Dad, I see the lights blinking over here. Thank you for teaching us through your words, your actions, and even though the smallest of memories, from a piece of bubble gum to a movie night, to a phone call with your brother, to a promise kept in Patty's honor. We will miss you deeply, but we will honor you by living as you lived, truthfully, openly, faithfully, and with love at the center of everything. God bless.
I am Emily, Eddie's favorite youngest daughter. My husband, Steve, and I live in Chicago. So strange to be standing here mourning my dad. Last Shabbat, Steve and I welcomed our first grandchild. The following Shabbat, we are grieving this enormous loss. As a friend just said to me, God gives with one hand and takes with another. I am Eddie's favorite youngest daughter. I am the milkman's daughter. From a very early age, I knew this was something special. When I was young, he took me to the dairy with him on weekends. I will never forget one particular Saturday morning. I couldn't have been 7 or 8 years old, going down to the dairy on a Saturday because in those days he often made deliveries on the weekends. We pulled up and immediately saw in the fenced-in lot with the dairy trucks, a man was trying to break in and steal from a truck. Oi. You could only imagine how calm Eddie responded to that. I loved living in Denver and being Eddie's daughter. One of my favorite perks, going to Dairy Queen and being given my medium vanilla cone with crunch coat because I was Eddie's daughter. There was nowhere I could go in Denver where people did not know my dad. I got my dad's initials, EAR, Edward Allen Robinson, Emily Ann Robinson, which meant I got his monogrammed items, towels in particular. And oh, how I loved his hand-me-down robes. He had great taste. I got my dad's out-of-control, oh-so-curly, unruly, thick, wiry eyebrows. I'm a total overpacker, just like my dad. I shared my dad's love-hate relationship with the game of golf. I must say he was not my favorite person to golf with. It's always kvetching. Don't have your phone, you're too slow. Taking too many practice swings, you're driving the wrong way. He also didn't like that my handicap was lower than his. I got my dad's sense of community, his love of card games, golf games, and just being social. Put yourself out there and get involved. This came from my dad. My gift of gab most certainly is an Eddie trait. I got my dad's sense of social and civic responsibility, being active in my community, chairing events, volunteering, and serving on a board or two. In his case, 33. My sense of being an employer and business operator came from my dad. Helping others, creating opportunities, and putting people in positions to thrive and succeed describes my dad. When Steve and I started our business 36 years ago, my dad preached receivables. Nothing matters more than your receivables, he'd say. Every time we spoke, how is your AR? And a big hats off to Uncle Dick, because I had the best role models ever. 2 brothers with the most special relationship I've ever witnessed. I must say much of my business acumen came from you, and also my blue eyes. I may have left Denver at the age of 18, but that didn't keep Dad from visiting me in Arizona when I was in college. And then life in Chicago, one of Dad's favorite places to visit. Oh, how he loved Michigan Avenue and shopping. One of his favorite stores, Gucci, or Gucky, as he always liked to say. I definitely got my love of shopping from my dad. Sorry, Steve. So many memories with such a wonderful, kind, funny, accomplished man, memories I hold dear and will provide much comfort to me in the days and years to come. Memories of traveling with him to dairy conventions, from Vancouver to Mobile, Alabama, to Florida and beyond. He had so many friends all over the country, and I was so proud to be his daughter. Memories of him hosting my sleepover birthday parties at his condo in Heather Ridge. And he would always have our favorite candy bars in the freezer for my friends because he loved them frozen. Memories of scratching his back and scratching his head. He especially loved his head scratched. Memories of playing tennis with him at Heather Ridge, of swimming at the town club in Green Gables, and I'd always swim on his back while he swam underwater just so my head could be above the water. Memories of golfing with him at Cherry Hills. A final one I'd like to share, a memory that has lasted the test of time, something that Dad and I still laughed about to this day. When I was 18, Dad took me to Hawaii for my high school graduation gift, just the two of us. We had an outing one day in our red rental car. As we were going back to the car, he was trying to unlock a blue car and got so frustrated that it couldn't unlock. I stood in wonder as he got so aggravated, we know aggravated Eddie, and he just couldn't get in. He looks at me and asks, "Isn't this our car?" He didn't know that I was behind him literally peeing my pants. I was laughing so hard. He was trying to get into the wrong car. From that point on, he would always ask me, "Emily, is this our car?" This context has survived the decades and something we laughed about every time we were together. I too see the lights flickering, and I know that's Patty. Dad, I know Patty took your hand and helped you pass with peace. This gives me so much comfort, knowing you didn't suffer, and knowing that you are now reunited with Patty. Please continue looking over us, and I promise to always make you proud. I will forever cherish being the milkman's daughter and your favorite youngest.
That's tough to follow. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Kaufman. I was married to Eddie's favorite middle daughter, Patty, before she passed away in 2008. I have been blessed to have Eddie as my father-in-law for almost 40 years, along with Steve Gorlick, who is married to Eddie's favorite youngest daughter, Emily, and John Duvall, who is married to Deborah, Eddie's favorite oldest daughter. We are the sons that Eddie never had. None of us were labeled as favorite. All of the girls were. You've heard a lot about Eddie and what he meant to the community and what he and Dick accomplished. We're all very proud of those achievements and contributions. But I want to share with you a bit more about Eddie as the person and the father that is behind the public persona. For as firm as Eddie was in business, he was a very kind and gentle soul. He did not like conflict. He was a very sweet man. Eddie was honest to an obsession, as you have heard. He tried not to take advantage, and if he saw someone who was hurt or in need, he would help. But he wasn't a sucker. One of my favorite Eddie stories is when he was out walking about San Francisco with Patty and Ellen. They encountered a panhandler asking for money for a cup of coffee. Eddie dropped the bags he was carrying because he was out shopping. He dug into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, which was very large and overstuffed, and he gave the panhandler a $10 bill. The panhandler thanked Eddie profusely, and he said, "Thanks, mister. Might you have another $10 for another cup of coffee?" Eddie's response, "Too much coffee isn't good for you." More about his sense of humor in a bit. You've heard that Eddie was on over 30 different civic boards and received over 30 different community recognitions. My favorite is the Colorado Restaurant Association Distinguished Service Award. And the reason is that Eddie won that award, so did his father, Sam, and so did my wife, Patty. All three of them won that award in successive different years. The award that stands out for me, however, is Eddie receiving the Hineni Award from the Jewish Community Center in 2012. Not because that was the most prestigious or the fanciest plaque or sculpture, and mind you, there were lots of fancy ones that adorn his office at home and at work, but that award captures Eddie Robinson. Hineni is a Hebrew phrase that means "here I am." It expresses a person's readiness and willingness to respond to a call. It is a declaration of total availability, often made without knowing what the future holds. This response to a call is seen as an act of courage and devotion, emphasizing a readiness to serve and engage. You are all familiar with Eddie being there publicly for the community, but he was also just a very good friend, as David explained, being there in times of need and support and offering wisdom and good counsel. For me, as the oldest child and living here in Denver for many, many years, Eddie also answered the call for me and for Patty. Patty worked at the dairy when we met, and Eddie and Dick mentored her and helped her thrive as a woman in a very male-dominated business. And as many of you know, Patty was very, very sick and went through extensive chemotherapy that lasted well over a year. Her treatments were grueling. Eddie was there for Patty and for me for every one of those treatments and was a constant support. Eddie was also there for me just as a friend and a father. I could count on him for advice and support. As he got older, Eddie relished just going out to dinner. He loved a good steak, often overcooked, and usually brought a steak home for Susan, even more overcooked. Eddie liked to go out and enjoyed big parties and events. He knew everyone in the room, as you heard, and they knew him. When he was a bit younger, he loved going to ball games, and we played golf together here in Denver. Having a father-in-law who is a past president of Cherry Hills Golf Course is a great perk. And we went on golf trips. My favorite one was to Torrey Pines. He was there for me. As you've heard, Eddie had a great sense of humor, and I want to leave you with one story that tells you about Eddie. For those of you who will go to the Shiva, you will see two photographs from around Halloween of last year at one of the poker games that David mentioned. Everyone wore masks for one of the photos in recognition of Halloween. The photographer then told everyone to take off their mask for photo number 2. Eddie did not hear and left his mask on, as the 11 others took their masks off. In photo 2, you will see Eddie front and center as the only one still wearing his Halloween mask. He relished that story and that picture. He shared it with his kids, and I'm sure many, many others, and he would be proud that I'm sharing it today. That is who Eddie was, a very serious and successful man who could laugh at himself and have fun. I will miss him terribly.
Eloheinu v'Elohei our God and God of all generations. Thou who governest all things with infinite wisdom and mercy, and who guidest the destinies of all of humankind. As a parent have you loved us and showered your blessings upon us. Therefore we shall not murmur even when sorrow befalls us, but with humility and unfaltering trust shall accept your decrees. In joy and in sorrow alike, we praise your goodness and acknowledge your justice. We remember that we are but strangers upon earth, Like a shadow, our life flees away. Help us, O God, so to walk in your sight, that when the few years of our earthly pilgrimage are ended, we may be ready to meet our end with tranquil mind. To thee we look for comfort and strength when one of our beloved is taken from us and a link is broken in the chain of love which binds us together. Though we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, we shall fear no evil, for you are with us. Be praised, O eternal our God, in all your dispensations, and sanctified be your name, now and forevermore. Let us all say together, Amen. Beloved family, dear friends, this is always a hard time. Even though Eddie was 93, and that's pretty good. Maybe that's why he went to the doctor so often. I don't know. Even though 93, his death came so suddenly to all of us. Because in some ways, we thought Dick and Eddie would live forever. And especially Eddie, because he's the younger brother, not the older brother. And so this suddenness makes it difficult for everyone, especially for you as his family. For you, Susan, who spent these last 38 years together, maybe longer, with Eddie. Beloved children and his stepchildren, who were always a part of his life as well. The grandchildren, the beloved brother and Marcia, to you as well. This is a hard time for all of you, because some of you will say, I don't know what's going to happen now, what's going to happen next. And the truth is, none of us really knows. That's what part of this day is about. But what we do learn from moments like this is that life itself is sacred, no matter how long we're privileged to live. And we ought to see that sacredness in life. We ought to understand that these relationships, these connections, because he was the connector, these connections are important. We're here today because we all cared about him. And I'm not just referring to the family, I'm referring to all of us who are in the sanctuary today. We all cared about him. We all liked him. We all loved him in so many different ways. Because his ability to connect understood each of us. He understood how to reciprocate that friendship, because that's who he was. Oh yeah, they were involved in all kinds of things. He and Dick, the whole family, they were involved in everything. I have a couple of things I just want to say about that. And I promised I wouldn't, but one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. I loved Eddie. We had this discussion so many times. But yes, they were on different sides of the political spectrum. But the truth is, they were on opposite sides of a lot of spectrums, just a couple others. Eddie was like his dad. He was part of National Jewish. That was important to him. Dick, he was part of American Medical Center. And both of those hospitals, for those of you who don't know, both of those hospitals were hospitals dedicated to TB here in this community, run by Jewish people, started by Jewish people, because we as a Jewish community cared about what would happen to people who had TB in the 19th and early 20th century. So Dick was with one, Eddie was with the other. They were both very proud, too, of their country club connections. But they wouldn't say it too often. Dick was at Denver Country Club. Eddie was at, I know, Susan, I know. And they were both at Green Gables for a long time. But Dick and Eddie both cared about their country club affiliations. Why? Why those two? There are a lot of country clubs in town, because those were the two that restricted Jewish participation for so many years. And when Eddie became president of Cherry Hills, that was a moment of pride for him, because he lifted up this community and cared about that. He didn't have to do that. And Dick didn't have to be involved in Denver Country Club. But they did it. Two different sides, two different people, but both with the same idea that they had to make those connections for the Jewish community, for our community. And that's who they were. And that's who they are. And they made a big difference in our community. We all know that. We don't have to mention all of the organizations, and I won't. But I do remember one night right here, a couple of years ago, when this congregation honored Dick and Eddie because of their work for our congregation together. This was their synagogue. They were raised at BMH. I know that. But this became their synagogue. And Dick was president of this synagogue. And Eddie, I know where Eddie sat, because I would see him from this pulpit. And he was one of those people who never, ever, ever said to me, "You shouldn't have said that." I didn't say the same about Dick. He was one of those people who was so accepting of whoever we were. We learn how to live because of people like Eddie Robinson. And so this is a time for us, yes, to express our condolences to this wonderful family in so many ways. Yes, even with humor. We have to laugh because Eddie laughed. But we are here, yes, to express our condolences to this family. But I hope that all of us, Jews and Gentiles, we're here for another reason. And that is to learn from a life that was so well lived. So many ways in which his personality fills this space. We're here to learn about that, but that's not enough to learn it. It's not enough to remember it. And I say this especially to the grandchildren and great-grandchildren as time will progress. It's our job to pass that on to others. If Eddie was a connector, be a connector. If Eddie understood how to get from one joyous moment to another, and one difficult moment to another, we ought to learn that ourselves. Because as we look at Eddie, we see somebody who really made a difference. And if we're willing to understand who he was in his highest moments of living, and to take it into our own hearts and then pass it on to someone else, we give him immortality that he's so justified learn. And each of us can learn from him. I'm going to share a little poem with you. I've used this poem for years, but I think it's true. The poet wrote, "For me to have made one soul the better for my birth, to have added but one flower to the garden of earth, to have struck one blow for truth in the daily fight with lies, to have done one deed of right in the face of calumnies, to have sown in the souls of men one thought that will not die, to have been a link in the chain of life. That shall be my immortality. Eddie deserves that immortality. And that immortality doesn't come just from the family. It has to come from the community. Because he made such a profound difference in our lives. A couple of weeks ago, I was in my doctor's office. Same doctor as Eddie's. And we talked. And he said to me, he said, you know, I've had a great life. Came from nowhere. He didn't know that this day was going to come about 2 weeks later. He really didn't. He said, I've had a profoundly wonderful life. Yes, there have been sadnesses. I understand, he said. And obviously, Patty's death was a tremendous sadness. But he said, I've loved my life. And I know that I've made some differences. And he was proud of that. And that's what brings us here today, to share that pride because of the kind of person he was. He was a person of great kindness, great empathy. He was a person who tried to reach out to others and was sad when there were sadnesses to be had. But because of his profound ability to connect, he tried to connect through so many different ways. And so it is to you, his friends, that we offer our collective condolences, because you have lost something as well. I consider myself to have lost something as well. He was such a good guy. And in his better days, when his hair was really taken care of, and when mine was not, he would look at me and he'd say, you have hair just like mine. He was one of those people that none of us will ever forget. And so to you, his friends, we hope that you will find strength in his memory. To you, his beloved children, may you find the strength to keep his memory alive through those who come after you. And make sure that you teach them about who he was. To you, his beloved stepchildren, whom he never forgot and always understood that you were a part of his life as well. We pray that you will always cherish those years that you had with him. To you, Dick and Marcia, you who probably knew him as well as anybody. Not probably, you did. You've shared so many things over the years. But mostly, you've shared your commitment to this community in so many different ways. And you did it together. I know, Dick, you always joked. You would call Eddie, what do you want to do about this? But the truth is, you guys did it together. Always together. There was never a time that you would say, oh, Dick, Eddie will do whatever I want. You guys did it together. And we as a community are grateful to you for that. And Susan, these 38 years have been years of strength, years of accomplishment, years of struggle as well. I understand. And Eddie understood. And we can only hope and pray that you will find continued strength in the wonderful way in which he tried to care for you in his highest moments and was always profoundly concerned about your welfare. It is in that spirit that we resolve to face our grief without self-pity, but with bravery and integrity, keeping before us forever the blessings that God conferred upon us in this life that he but lent to us for these many decades. And in a world where our most precious goods are perishable, let us resolve to honor our beloved dead by being so good to the living, so kindly, so understanding, so forgiving, so transcendent of pettiness, that in our love for him, we shall hearken to those who remain and who need us and our strength. May it be through new relationships and new service to humanity that we make good our loss, and in the beauty of our own lives, erect the noblest monument to our mourned dead. And thus the beauty of his life will ever abide among us all as a living and loving benediction. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach. Yehi shem Adonai mevarach me'ata v'ad olam. God has given. God has taken away. Praise be the name of God, now and forevermore. And let us all say together, Amen.
Amen. That's right. Got it. So through all of these beautiful words from dear friends and from family, we know that what we are witnessing here today, what we are mourning here today, is the passing of a man who represented a generation of builders, of people who lifted all of us up and created so many institutions and so many communities that will live on so far past him. There is a particular teaching that comes from the book of Ecclesiastes that says, Dor holech v'dor ba. One generation leaves and the next comes. But when we acknowledge the truth of who Eddie was, we know that to say that one generation leaves is just not enough. One generation has built what will stand, and one generation will continue to inspire. Eddie was a particular brand of someone who was a pioneer in so many different ways. And that is not a word that we use lightly in this community. Someone who inspires each and every one of us. And we know that someone who held his tradition and his family so close and so core to who he was, that too will inspire us as well. And so we say, Dor holech, one generation leaves. And we hope, Eddie, that you go with great peace and with great knowledge of all that you have inspired. And Dor ba, may this generation, all of us here today, stand and walk forward from here with the great gifts that Eddie has given each and every one of us. May we continue to build like he did. May we continue to love like he did. May we continue to laugh like he did. And may we continue to hold family close like he did. May his memory forever be a blessing. And together we all say, Amen.
We turn now to the words of our prayer for the deceased That is how we begin to close this opportunity for memorial. The words of El Malei Rachamim, the first time we know that we have fulfilled the beginning of the obligations that we have to say goodbye to Eddie and to do right by him as we understand it in Jewish tradition, to tell the story of his life, which we have done, and now to make sure that he is in a place where he is resting in peace. And so we say for the first time words of memory and words of farewell. And so we ask you to please rise as you are able for El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Kedoshim Odorim Kezoar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Yitzchak Avram Beshmuel Vechana Shehalach Le'olamo Barachamim Yastireu Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim Beitzror Beitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai Unachalato Ve'anuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo Ve'nomar Amen.
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold Edward Allen Robinson close to you forever so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. In just a moment, we're going to get some instructions from Jim about what happens next. But as we conclude this part of our service, knowing that we have told the story, or a piece of the story, a tiny sliver of the story, in fact, we continue to hold Eddie in our hearts and his memory and his legacy and to lift it up. The work of supporting this family and of grieving continues following burial. There will be Shiva gatherings that are going to happen at Ellen Robinson's house, Eddie's niece. They are at 5238 East Cedar Avenue in Denver. Today, after the service until 7:30, and tomorrow from 2 until 7:30, prayer gathering or minyan will happen both days at 6 p.m.
And ladies and gentlemen, there will be valet parking available for the Shiva if you'd like to take advantage of that. We will ask you to remain in your places as we escort the casket and the family back to their cars. We'll ask you to please refrain from coming forward and trying to speak with the family and express your condolences. Please hold off on that. And if you happen to run into them in the foyer or the restroom or anything, just please be aware they do need to get themselves back to their cars and to the cemetery. We do have an escorted procession today from the synagogue to Emmanuel Cemetery, which is within Fairmount. If you'd like to join us for interment, please return to your cars as quickly as possible. Please don't delay with conversation in the sanctuary or the foyer, and have your headlights on. That will help, have your hazards on in addition to your headlights. That will help identify you as a participant in the procession. If you're not going to the cemetery, if we can please ask you to give way to those who are. Our procession will start lining up using the southeast exit of the synagogue parking lot. If you're not going to the cemetery, we'll ask you to use the northeast exit of the synagogue. If I can invite the pallbearers forward at this time, those who have been asked to participate at the synagogue.
Adonai madam v'tadeu.
Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us?
V'nenosh v'techasheveu.
What are we that you are mindful of us?
Adam le'evel dama.
We are like a breath, our days like a passing shadow.
Yamav ketzel over, baboker yatzitz v'chalav.
We come and go like grass,
La'erev yemolel ve'yavesh.
which in the morning shoots up renewed,
Tashivenu shadaka.
and in the evening fades and withers.
Vatomer shuvu v'nei adam.
You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, O mortal creatures."
Lu chachmu yaskilu zot.
Would that we were wise,
Yavinu le'acharitam.
that we understood where we are going.